And I'm going to go ahead and admit all. Are you ready, Jason, Marissa, Mercedes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready.
Yes, yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Flex Day session. We're going to have Michael Jason Williams talk about foster care education and COVID-19. Mr. Williams, I believe you are the founder of Brainwise Solutions, is that correct?
That is correct. I'm one of the three co-founders.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, do you want to go ahead and get started and let us know who you are and what you do, and then give your presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, take it away.
All right. So thank you everyone for being here. As Jennifer said, my name is Michael Jason Williams. I go by Jason. I actually see some familiar faces in there. So I see Cedric. I met Cedric recently. I also saw Veronica in there. So good to see some familiar faces. So today I've been asked to talk about foster care and the education system and how it impacts folks at Fresno City College and in the education system. And then even right now with COVID-19 and how that is having an impact on foster youth as well as all of us. So we're going to be here for approximately an hour. Feel free to ask questions as we go. And I will do my best with this technology to make this as seamless as possible, but you know how that goes. So, like I said, my name is Jason Williams. I have a master's degree in psychology. I am one of 3 co-founders of a new nonprofit. We just became a nonprofit this January. And so I am currently acting as the executive director of Brainwise Solutions. And so Brainwise Solutions really is something that we came up with because we strongly felt like systems change is needed. And systems change is a broad idea that really covers everything. And so for me, my experience has been working in the foster care system. And so that is one of those systems that I passionately intend to make change. And you'll see some statistics today that talk about why the system needs to change and should change. And then other systems are you folks at the education system is another huge impactful system on all of us, and even more so foster youth and folks. Other systems include the court system, law enforcement, all kinds of systems. So our big push is to change the system so that people have better outcomes and we have a more successful community as a whole. I'll start off with what I've seen and what I've learned. So I've been working in this field for about 18 years. I started off at a nonprofit and I'm back at a nonprofit. I worked within multiple systems throughout that. And I've really seen and learned that the impact of trauma, it's real, and especially early trauma. Some of the research just shows us how if a child experiences things in utero or in the very first years of their lives, it has a profound impact on the trajectory of their entire lives. So I'll be talking about that as we go as well. And one of the really important things that we've learned is one of the assumptions is when you've been through a tough go as a kid, maybe it'll affect you emotionally. So maybe you have, you grew up in a domestic violence situation in your family. And so people would expect you to maybe have trust issues or have anxiety or depression. And that is definitely something that we see. But what we're also learning is that it impacts us physically as well. And that's hugely important because it's one thing to think about the emotional impact something has on us and how maybe we need to go to therapy and work through some things. But understanding that it impacts us physically as well is hugely important. When we see the rates of physical ailments, we often tell people, oh, they just need to eat better and they need to exercise. And it's really not as simple as that. Those are important things, but we really haven't taken into account the impact that trauma has on us physically. And so I'll be talking about that in more detail today also. And then the major impacts that you'll see around trauma are these things right here. It affects our abilities to learn and retain information. So if you're an educator, you want folks to learn and retain information. And so that's why it's really important for us to understand how trauma affects our brains and our abilities to learn and retain information. So all of the things that I'm going to talk about are really important around foster youth, but we are all affected by these things. But often foster youth are affected even more. And one thing that's really important is that variation is the norm. So when I talk about these things in generalities, I'm not saying that every foster kid is going to have this impact or every person is going to have this outcome. I'm speaking in generalities because sometimes we have folks that are extremely successful who have experienced a lot of trauma and maybe even foster care, and they're extremely resilient and they're extremely successful. So oftentimes people are like, oh, well, you're talking about all this bad stuff, but I know someone who is very successful. Well, I'm talking about generalities, and the norm is not the successful folks. Some folks have this innate ability to overcome all odds, and we know those folks, but unfortunately that's not the norm. The next one, so the first one was ability to learn and retain information. The next one was ability to build and maintain relationships. I can't emphasize the importance of relationships enough. As we talk through today, I'm going to talk about how relationships really are the key to all of this. Positive relationships help us go in a positive direction, and negative or neglectful relationships help us go in a negative trajectory. And building and maintaining relationships is really something that foster youth tend to struggle with. They're really not great at maintaining relationships, and that's not out of the norm for a lot of us, but if we wanted to maintain relationships, we could just work a little harder. They a lot of times don't have the actual abilities to do those kinds of things. And then the ability to ask for help. This is another thing that a lot of us struggle with. I hate asking for help, but with age, I've learned that I can't do everything on my own. But with that comes some shame sometimes. And so same kind of thing. A lot of foster youth have experienced a lot of shame around the people that were supposed to take care of me didn't. And so maybe I'm not worth people taking care of me. And so asking for help can be just a huge shameful situation for some folks, even for some of us. I mean, we feel like we're very strong and we're independent, and our culture tells us that we should pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and every man for themselves. I can think of a million cliches around not asking for help. So again, for foster youth, for them to simply raise their hand and say, hey, can I get an extra hour of your time, could be really impossible. And so I'll come back to that later on. And then the overall ability to succeed. Again, we all have the ability to succeed. And with that comes a lot of challenges. And so again, variation is kind of the norm. We're born with certain abilities and potentials. And a lot of that can change based on our very early relationships. And not only our early relationships, but the environment that we grow up in. So I am going to try and glance at the chat every once in a while, just because I want to make sure that if there are any things that I need to address, I can address them in the moment before they get scrolled up. So frustrating claim, pick oneself up from their bootstraps because assuming we begin in the same place. Yes, absolutely, Jacqueline. I totally agree with that. And that saying about pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, some of us don't even have bootstraps. Like that's right. the concept that is so detrimental to our society, is expecting people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Some of us don't even got shoes or straps. So it's just interesting. But those kinds of messages are so prevalent in our individualistic society that it stops us from asking for help because we think we're supposed to be able to do everything by ourselves, and that's really not the case. Okay. The other thing I just want to put out there is that I have seen some successes, but unfortunately the failures that I've seen have absolutely been terrible. I know a young man right now who recently turned 23. He was in the foster care system, and I am very concerned for his well-being because he continues to fail by any measure that you could put in for him. And he, again, has difficulty maintaining relationships and difficulty asking for help. And I am very concerned that he's just going to end up on the streets and potentially become a statistic and lose his life. So this is going to be kind of a bummer, but at the end, I'm going to really try and bring it back to positive and hopeful stuff. So just kind of a warning that this is kind of a bummer kind of situation. Okay, so some statistics. It's good to kind of know where we're starting from. The number of kids in care in Fresno County between 2011, 2019, the average is about 2,000 kids in care. So I always like to start with that because I don't know that people know the scope of what we're talking about. So 2,000 children are usually in foster care any given time. And unfortunately right now, due to COVID or due to the things that are going on right now, that number has crept up and it's about 2,600, which is a lot. But it hasn't been up to 2,600 since probably about 10 years ago when I was looking at the statistics. So that is concerning because the first conversation that was had was when kids don't go to school, teachers are the number one reporters to CPS that say, hey, something's going on with this kid. So if kids aren't at school, they expected the numbers to drop considerably. But that has actually been the complete opposite. So that's a really interesting phenomenon, and it'll be really interesting to see if we can look back at that data and figure out what happened there. Not sure if it has been extreme situations and that's what has made the numbers increase. So again, we're not really sure because we're still in the middle of this crisis and pandemic. So honestly, the current outcomes are dismal. Someone like me who believes in systems change, I also believe that unfortunately, the current system was designed to get the outcomes that we currently have. So that's why I strongly believe that we have to change the system, because these are the current outcomes that we're getting with the current system that's in place. So around 30% of the kids who have experienced abuse will abuse their own children. Usually people say, well, if they lived through abuse, aren't they going to not abuse their kids? And the whole thing around that is that unfortunately, our brains are wired for patterns. And so when we've grown up in patterns, whether we like it or not, we are often going to repeat the awareness of those patterns. So if you grew up in a certain situation, in a certain environment that became your normal, when you grow older, whether you like it or not, you're more likely to repeat that. And so a third of the kids will be likely to enter the CPS system with their own kids. 4% graduate from college versus 36% of the general population. So that alone, if we believe as a culture that education is the key to getting out of poverty, and we believe that education is the key to success, 4% graduation from college versus 36% of the general population, that is not success. That is a huge, huge lack of success. 1 in 3 have experienced homelessness or couch surfed. So same kind of thing. That's a lot of people experiencing homelessness or couch surfing. So again, that goes back to relationships, the ability to ask for help, and those sorts of things. Let's see. Jason, could you please provide us the link of the source of these statistics? Yes, absolutely. So I can tell you right now, the statistic around the children in care, the UC Berkeley has a website, and UC Berkeley actually is connected to the entire state of California's, it's called CWS, Child Welfare System. And so all of the data gets pulled directly from the UC Berkeley website. And it's a really great website. I love it because literally I was able to go on there and look at the rates of kids in care from April of 2020, all the way back to when they started collecting that data. So if you just Google UC Berkeley child welfare data, that'll pull up the kids in care. And then these other statistics, you can, there's a great website called Kids Data, and it has a lot of these as well. And I have resources on a slide later on, so you can also get those. And then I'm not sure if we're going to send a slides out to everyone, but we can also do that. Okay, the last, sure. Let's see. And then the last one is 75% of women and 33% of men receive government benefits to meet their basic needs. So That's a lot of folks that went through the system that are now on government benefits to meet their basic needs. And so again, if we measure success in our society by not being on government benefits to meet your basic needs, not being homeless, the American dream is to own your own home, getting a good education so you get a good job, and not abusing your children. These four statistics alone are telling us that, and again, I don't like to use this overgeneralization, but foster youth are not being successful if you were to measure success by these four outcomes. Does anyone have any questions around these? Okay. So I like to talk about, sure.
Oh, I was just going to ask, when we're talking about foster kids, we're talking about kids that have been in the system for a substantial amount of time, or just a small, like at any point? Like what defines a foster child? I guess that's in terms of length, right? Because I know not all of them are in the system forever, at least hopefully.
Yeah, good question. I will talk a little bit later about a couple of different scenarios. We do have kids that are in the system forever. They age out of the system. So the measures of those statistics are usually they were in foster care at any point in time, and it doesn't matter the length. They don't really tease out that much about length in care. They do have statistics around how long kids stay in care. I believe the average is about 18 months. So that kind of tells you if, and here's the thing too, is that it's such a huge variety of situations and ages. The average age of a kid in foster care is between the ages of 8 and 10. So most people usually think, oh, it's babies that are ending up in foster care and then they're getting out of foster care. Or a lot of folks hear about teenagers in foster care. And unfortunately, it really does vary. There's kids every age group in foster care at any given moment. And again, if you go to that UC Berkeley website, it does a phenomenal job. You can actually click on like the rates of kids in care, and it'll break it out by age, which is really cool because you can actually see that right now there are 400 kids between the ages of 13 and 18 in foster care, and 400 kids between the ages of 5 and 8 in foster care, and 800 kids between the ages of 0 and 5 in foster care. So if you're really interested in those kinds of numbers, you can get that information from that UC Berkeley website for sure. And so it is, at any point in time, they were, the court took jurisdiction of custody of those children. That's the definition of being in foster care.
I mean,
does that help?
That's stunning. So all these statistics for people, for children that have just been in foster care for, I mean, if you say the average is 18 months, I mean, that's not a huge amount of time.
Potentially, yes. But again, it really depends, because if you're a 2-year-old and you spent 18 months in care, that was the majority of your life. Whereas if you're an 18-year-old and you entered care as a baby, so that's the other thing. We have kids that enter care as babies, and they stay in care their entire life or their entire youth. So it really, really varies. Unfortunately, there's disproportionality, which I won't really get into in this conversation. But unfortunately, the statistics also show that our young African-American Black kids stay in foster care longer than any other kids. They have lower adoption rates. So I will talk a little bit about the cultural ethnic differences, but not a whole lot. Let's see. So the other thing that's important to think about is, why do kids go into care? And so the number one reason kids enter care, at least in Fresno County, and this is it's pretty close nationwide, it's the same. So neglect is the number one reason. And neglect is things like not having enough food, not having appropriate shelter, being left alone, at an inappropriate age, those sorts of things. And in our community, neglect is usually very closely related to drug use and drug abuse. So it's a lot of families that have kids and then they're not taking care of them appropriately. Lots of extremely, extremely dirty homes, those sorts of things. And then the number 2 is at risk or their sibling was abused. So if we have one youth that is maybe physically abused and CPS goes out and investigates, they a lot of times will remove all of the kids because they're also at risk of abuse. If we have one kid that's being physically abused and we just remove that one kid, unfortunately, the likelihood is that whoever's abusing that one kid will then shift and start abusing another kid if we remove just the one kid. So that gets into a complicated situation. So a lot of kids are removed as sibling groups. And then the number 3 statistic is around physical abuse. That's about 15% of the cases where they're actually being physically abused. Unfortunately, what we usually see in the media is the physical abuse. So if you see a commercial around foster care and abuse, you might see a kid with a black eye. And as you can see, that's not the number 1 reason that kids get removed, but it is in the top 3. And then the other thing that's really important to remember is emotional abuse. So emotional abuse, if you kind of think this through a little bit, if you're being neglected or you're being physically abused, the likelihood that you're also being emotionally abused is extremely high. So unfortunately, proving emotional abuse in a court of law is extremely difficult. Because if you have a kid who shows up with a bruise and they also say, well, my mom always screams at me and tells me that I'm no good, how can we prove that that's an accurate statement? Unfortunately, it gets into this whole he said, she said kind of thing. So emotional abuse, unfortunately, is pretty difficult to prove. So that emotional abuse usually goes along with all these things. And then the other thing that's really important is to think about critical times during the lifespan of development. So I don't know if any of you have taken child development courses, but there are critical periods when our brains are developing where any of these things that happen will have a greater impact or less of an impact. And usually the most critical period is that first year of life and when a baby is in utero. So that's when, of course, our brains are developing, our bodies are developing. And if a mother is experiencing domestic violence or any of these things, the baby is literally kind of cooking in the pot of her belly. And so I'll talk a little bit later about chemicals and those sorts of things. But if you can imagine a baby that's being bathed in something like cortisol, that is not healthy for the baby. And it literally sets that trajectory when a baby's born to go in a different direction. And then one of my favorite neuropsychologists and doctors in this field is Dr. Bruce Perry. I strongly encourage you to look up Dr. Bruce Perry. He has a wonderful book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And he just talks about trauma and its impact on kids who have been abused. And he talks about if trauma occurs in the first year of a baby's life, the amount of services and support that that child will need will be 10 to 20 times more than a child experiencing abuse or a trauma later on in their life. So if you had a 4-year-old who experienced the exact same type of neglect or abuse as a newborn, that 4-year-old, their brain is already pretty well developed and has had some pretty good foundational experiences. So the 4-year-old experiencing abuse at the age of 4 will not need as much support and services and all of those sorts of things as that baby that experiences that thing, because it's such a critical time in their lifespan development. So hopefully that makes sense. Any questions
for you, Jason? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, you said, most of them, they stay lifelong, and, of course, until I understand that until they reach adolescence. And then I'm just wondering what would happen afterward, after they leave foster care, what happened to them? What's next, in terms of finding them, maybe entering college or finding them help for finding them a job or any help they get from the government or from the community, or what happened next? I mean, because, the world is crazy, out there is not easy, especially
Yeah.
if you are abused as a child, emotionally and the physical aspect is really play a role. And it's going to be very difficult for these kids to be out there by themselves and trying to make it. So I'm just wondering what would happen next.
Yes. So I'm going to talk about that throughout the presentation. And honestly, the main thing is yes, there are some services. There are a lot of what we call transitional aged youth services. So that could be the range from 18 years of 18 to 24. But after that, they're just another member of society. They don't get any special treatment. They don't get anything extra because they get to check a box that says they were in foster care. So hopefully we've done everything we can while they're in the system to prepare them for the real world. But again, those statistics that I first showed, they are going to be experiencing homelessness. They are going to end up on welfare or food stamps and those sorts of things. Those of them that really can't relearn how to do things and build on their skills, those are the ones that unfortunately we see not succeed. And again, some surprise us and are super successful. I used to, when I do training, sometimes I would have a list of successful foster youth, because there's definitely some super successful folks like Cher, Eddie Murphy. There's quite a few famous folks who experienced foster care, and they've come back and said, hey, this is how it was for me. And because I had great relationships, or I had that one person to help me get through some of these things, they have been able to be successful. So again, I don't want to say that all of them fail, but most of them need help, extra help, and a lot of them are going to really, really struggle for a really long time. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Once they leave care, there's really not a lot in place, especially once they get into that weird age around 25 to 30, when some of us left the nest and were able to come back when we'd fall on our face because we lose a job or needed help. But a lot of these kids don't have anywhere to go back to. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, I just want to follow up very quick one. I'm so sorry to take your time, but
no, go ahead.
you are running NGO that's related with this issue. I mean, are you considering something like that? Because this is the place that you need to fill the gap. I think even me as an individual, I would love to do something for these people once they left the shelter, because they are in the wilderness, and we already abused and have this scar already. So even for normal people who come from decent family would have struggled in the real world. So I mean, is there any consideration within your organization to come up with something that these people can get help, either from the government or from NGOs, or some kind of program that can be worked out?
Yeah, one of the resources I'm going to talk about at the end, it's called John Burton Associates, and they work a lot with foster youth. And I'll talk also about some of the things that the community and other agencies are doing to help out, because you're absolutely right. They are out in the wilderness, and even us who haven't experienced this and have this scar that you speak of need help sometimes. So great. There is a question about sexual abuse. So sexual abuse is a hard thing to really tease out, and here's why. So the number of sexual abuse allegations that are found true is like 4th or 5th on this list. So it's not as as prevalent, but of course it's so sensationalized and such a terrible, terrible thing to happen to someone. Absolutely, it is one of the most damaging situations, because if you can imagine, sexual abuse includes emotional abuse, physical abuse, potentially some neglect by a parent that left them alone to get sexually abused and that sort of thing. So sexual abuse is terrible. But here's the other thing that we know is the reporting rates are so low because, again, there's so much shame involved in sexual abuse that a lot of people don't admit to it. And we get those statistics, unfortunately, later on. So a 30-year-old comes back after 30 years and says, yeah, I was actually sexually abused, but I never told anyone because they were afraid. A lot of abusers not only shame kids, but tell them, if you tell anyone, I will kill your family, kind of thing. So the fear and the manipulation around sexual abuse is huge. But we know now that in the general population, we hear that 1 in 3 females experience sexual abuse, 1 in 4 males experience sexual abuse. So obviously that's not being caught at an early age and reported or investigated because of the shame and the fear around that. So yeah, it doesn't show up on this, but unfortunately it is also happening. And the other thing is too, sometimes kids get taken into CPS for one of these other things, and then it comes out, oh, and they're being sexually abused. One of the first cases I had when I worked as a social worker, it was 7 kids, and they got taken into foster care because their dad was drunk driving their RV up in the mountains and crashed the whole thing. And so, of course, they were removed because dad was drunk and driving. But then, come to find out, it was one girl and all of her brothers. The oldest brother was teaching the other boys sex with the sister. So we didn't remove them for that, but it came out after the fact. So, okay. So what are we going to talk? Oh, brief moment on the brain. So I did want to talk about child, just because this is the foundation. This is what we need to understand, because this is how we rebuild, and this is how we understand what our kids have experienced and why they kind of do the things that they do when we see them now at the college and that sort of thing. So foundation is key. When it's just like a good building. If you have a poor foundation or it's uneven, the way that the building goes up is going to be crooked, or it's going to be really wobbly, and it's not going to be strong. Same thing with our brains. If our foundation is not strong, the way our brain is built, it develops from the bottom up kind of thing. So the last thing to develop is our logic and our reasoning. So if we have poor development in the very early ages of our life and we experience a lot of neglect, then our foundation is going to be really, really shaky. Hopefully you guys have all seen the commercials about Read, Talk, Sing that First 5 puts out. That's so brilliant because those are building the foundations of language and relationships. When we read and talk and sing to our babies, it's laying that strong foundation so that they can learn based on that foundation. When kids grow up around people with multiple languages, later on, they always have a better ability to learn new languages because their foundation was built with that wiring so that they could continue to build on that foundation. It's like I've taken Spanish like 5 times and it just doesn't stick because I grew up with only one language in my family. And the other thing that's really important is neuroplasticity. And this is why some of us can be successful after we've experienced these things, because our brains they have plasticity. So they're not set in stone. Foundation is important, but to the day we die, our brains can still grow and reshape and have new connections built. So the whole thing, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, is completely false. It takes more effort, and if we have a poor foundation, it's more difficult, but our brains always have the ability to regrow and reshape. And that's really the key once you've been in a situation like this to make things better, because you do have neuroplasticity. And again, insults during critical periods. So again, if you have a serious problem that happens in utero, it could really set things up pretty bad. Or if it's in that first year of life, or when we're adolescents, that's the other time when our brain is growing and learning about logic and reasoning. So if something happens during those critical periods, it can have a profound impact as opposed to those other non-critical periods. It might still have an impact, but it's much more during those critical periods. And then what we're really learning now, there's this great new body of work around emotions and our brain as a predictive tool. And what we really need to understand is that a lack of experiences is usually what's missing for our kids that we see that are less successful. So again, our environment is so important. So if you grow up in a family where if you do good in school, you're a loser or people make fun of you, then why would you try harder? If you're getting negative feedback around success in a certain area, you're going to have fewer experiences that support your success in that area. So if you have a kid and like they made it and they actually graduated, and it's that whole, oh, I was the first one to graduate because education just wasn't really valued in my home, but I felt like it was important. Their lack of experiences in an educational setting or parents who read to them, those lack of experiences aren't going to build a good foundation of their brain to build upon that in your program at City College. So that's the other thing is, and that can go with all kinds of things. So lack of experiences. If you grew up in a community where neighbors did not talk to each other, like we don't talk to our neighbors because it's dangerous, or we don't talk to our neighbors because they're a different religion or a different color, any of those things, that lack of experiences of relationships with other people, if they come across your class and you see them and you're like, okay, in this class, we're going to have group breakout sessions. And so we're going to build groups, and that's going to be, your success is going to be determined by your success as a group. That might be a fearful experience, and they don't necessarily have experiences working as a team because maybe they've always been told you do it on your own or you don't do it all kind of thing. So a lack of experience is also important. And our brain is a predictive tool. This is really interesting too. So anytime we interact with someone, our brains are creating that experience based on previous experiences. So unfortunately, if you're the best professor on campus, but your kid that comes in is a foster youth and they've had a bunch of other professors that aren't as encouraging and supportive and great as you are, our brains are predictive. So, and it's based on our previous experiences. So they're going to predict that you are the same as all of their other experiences. So if they haven't experienced a professor that reaches out and is supportive, their brain will tell them that this one is just like all the rest. So no matter what you do, their prediction is going to have to be reshaped around that current experience. So, and that's some cutting edge stuff that we're really just learning now. And that applies to a lot of different things. It applies to emotions, which is really messing up the way we usually think of emotions. I absolutely loved the movie Inside Out. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was a Disney movie, and the anger guy was like, he was a red guy and he would bang his fist in the fire and all that stuff. It was hilarious and it was beautiful. But what science has told us now is that that's completely inaccurate. And our brains don't have that localization of, oh, your sadness is here and you're born with it and it's developed, the kind of thing. Our brains are predictive based on previous experiences. So very interesting stuff. I'm not going to get into that a lot right now. Okay. So here are the problems. This is the list of problems, and this is what trauma does during development. So maybe some of you have heard of ACEs. There was a huge study that was done in 1996, and it was called the ACEs study, and it stood for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And so it was a great study because this is where we started to learn that it's not only emotional issues that come out of these negative experiences, it's also physical problems that come out. And so one of the things that we're really good at too in our society is this whole separation of brain and body, mind, body. Those are interwoven and interconnected. You can't separate those two. So if you go through an emotional experience and you think that it did not affect your body, you're wrong. When we have threatening experiences, our bodies create chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline to survive that situation. But that chemical doesn't just stay in our brain, it's in our whole entire body. So our kids that grew up in really, really rough neighborhoods, really, really violent situations, their bodies were flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And those chemicals are great when we need to run for our lives, but those chemicals are toxic and do lots of damage to not only our brains, but our entire bodies. So, adverse childhood experiences is the big one. And so they came up with 3 different categories, and it really matches the reason kids end up in foster care. So the 3 categories were neglectful situations, abusive situations, and then other family situations like divorce, someone in your family having a mental illness, someone in your family being in prison or in jail. And so those were those adverse child experiences. The study was done in San Diego, which is beautiful, very affluent community. The study was done, 75% of the people, there are about 17,000 people in the study. About 75% were white. Everyone in the study had healthcare insurance through Kaiser. So when you look at that demographic for that study, that showed us that those negative things had an impact on people's bodies. When you look at a community like Fresno, it's a little bit different, right? So just imagine not a very diverse community showed that negative childhood experiences had a huge impact on our bodies and our health. And then imagine kids growing up in the valley, high rates of poverty, racial negativity, all of those things have a huge impact on us. So they ended up developing out these ACEs. And so I love that they kept the ACE word. So adverse childhood experiences was that first study, but now we also talk about adverse community environment. So those of us like me, I went to Roosevelt, I grew up in Southeast Fresno, loved my neighborhood, but it was dangerous. And so that was an adverse community environment. I was okay on my street. We had a bunch of old folks living on my street, so it was fairly safe. But you go one street that way or one street this way, and it was rough. And the whole neighborhood was a little rough. So that was an adverse community environment that I experienced. And that isn't necessarily captured in that initial ACE study. And so the other one is adverse cultural experiences. We're experiencing this has come to such a head in 2020. Same kind of thing. When we experience microaggressions and macroaggressions and racism and bias, those things have an impact on us as well. And not just our emotions. They don't just make us angry or sad. They have an effect on our body. So if you have a youth who's been experiencing foster care and they're Black, their list of ACEs and adverse child experiences and adverse cultural experiences will be pretty high. So not only is their brain going to be affected by that and their ability to learn, like I mentioned, but their bodies, they're more likely to have things like COPD and high blood pressure. We often have this disconnect and people say, oh, well, that culture doesn't eat really well and that's why they have high rates of X, Y, and Z. And what we're learning is that, yeah, diet has an effect on things, but adverse cultural experiences, constantly living in fear or constantly living in a threat environment, because when you walk down the street, you're not sure if a police officer drives by, if you're the next one right now, like that has an effect on our bodies. So people who experience 4 or more ACEs, their life expectancy is shorter than people that don't have as many ACEs. So I'm not going to get like super political and cultural, but man, if that isn't white privilege right there, literally shortening people's lives who are minorities, I don't know what is. So I'm not going to get into that because I get passionate. Okay, the next one is adverse circuitry expression. So this one's cool. So this is all about our brains. So we like to, again, speak in generalities. So when you go to your doctor, they went to medical school and everything they studied was generalities. So if you come in and you have a list of symptoms, the diagnosis that they're going to give you is based on generalities. But guess what? We're all different. So when you have kids that develop this thing called autism spectrum disorder, if you look at this in a different way, it's an adverse circuitry expression. So some of us interact different socially because our brains are wired different for social interactions. So again, it's just something to think about, adverse circuitry expression, how our brains express our experiences as we interact. And the next one is adverse catastrophic events. So that's another ACE. We are living through that right now. We are experiencing, all of us, an adverse catastrophic event in this COVID-19 thing. The fact that I'm not standing in front of you all in some great room and we're like actually connecting, not over this weird Zoom thing, is an adverse catastrophic event. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the impact of this is also. I don't know how many of you are currently experiencing a loss of sleep or heightened anxiety, heightened fatigue. Just imagine, that's just due to this current COVID situation. But add that on top of some of these other things and we really have some difficulties. So is there more bad news? Okay, yeah, a little bit more bad news. Okay, so the effects of COVID-19, again, I already talked about this. We're not sure why exactly, but the rate of kids in foster care right now is way higher than it normally is. Seriously, over the last 10 years, it's almost 400 more than the average over the last 10 years. So that's intense. One of the things that you brought up a question about kids later on. So in 2012, a law was passed. Up until 2012, when kids turned 18, they were kicked out or released from the foster care situation because they were legal adults. And we were seeing these terrible outcomes. Kids were, again, homeless, poor educational outcomes, all those sorts of things. So the law was passed to extend foster care to the age of 21. So right now, you might have kids that come to City College and they're 20, and you might be like, well, you can't be in foster care because you're over the age of 18. Well, actually, that's not true. Up till the age of 21, till their 21st birthday, they can stay in care now. So right now, again, I pulled this number directly from the stats from April of 2020. There are 206 kids in the foster care system that are legally adults, but they still are in the system. So that means that they still have a social worker. They're still getting some type of support from the government, but they have certain requirements to stay eligible. So they do have to be either enrolled in school or working or have some type of other situation that will keep them qualifying for foster care. So some of those kids are getting a direct payment that normally would go to a foster parent, and it's going directly to the youth so that they can try and be self-sufficient. There have been, so this passed in 2012, and it went fully effective by 2015. And they started off with just 18-year-olds, and then they expanded it to all of the 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds. So again, This is 3 more years of support, and it's been good for most kids. So that's a good thing. And that is a move in the right direction. There's always rumors about, well, they add another 3 years, because again, kids are still not successful a lot of times and still struggling. But that's, again, more money to support them. So we'll see how that goes. So good stuff that has been done. Shelter in place. So same kind of thing. We're all experiencing this adverse catastrophic event. And so I'm going to jump down to the bottom one. Disparities are amplified. We've seen this in other areas. So we've seen that communities of color, minority folks living in poverty, this situation, this COVID-19 thing, has made it much more difficult for those folks who already were struggling. And so it's really showing us that the disparities are real. And when something huge like this happens, it affects those of us at the bottom end of the spectrum even more than someone at the top end or in the middle. These things are even more difficult for foster youth. Social distancing, again, if you're already bad at building and maintaining relationships, and now you're not even allowed to go out and build relationships or maintain relationships, and you have to do it over this weird thing that's very uncomfortable and unnatural, just imagine how many youth who have been in foster care are just shut down. I don't even want to try this whole Zoom thing. Like, that's weird and frustrating, and maybe my technology sucks. Maybe my foster parent won't even let me have a cell phone or a laptop because I got in trouble for using it inappropriately or whatever. And so there's all these technology challenges. Literally, when the shutdown first started, families had to stop visiting with their kids. So maybe we had some kids that were like this close to returning to their family, and all of a sudden that had to stop. Like, the most important thing in their life is their family, and that connection might have been cut off. Have these acute health concerns. So we already have kids that are experiencing these toxic chemicals, and now on top of that, there's this added layer of fear and anxiety and chemicals that are going to make those health outcomes even more impactful and more scary. Let's see. I've heard a lot of stories about kids that barely were keeping a job, and then it got shut down, so they lost their job. So now they're struggling even more. A lot of those kids, if they're in that AB-12 program, maybe they're in a housing situation where they're paying a portion of their rent, and that's the only way they can remain eligible. And then they lose their job because of COVID. Now, not only did they lose their job, they're going to lose their housing potentially. And then if all of that is what's keeping them to be barely successful in a class at City, that they could lose that too. And if they got financial aid, I mean, it just really has a snowball effect on a lot of things for all of us, but even more so, again, it's amplified for folks who are already struggling. Let's see, Veronica says students in foster care are on lockdown right now. No visits, can't leave, especially group homes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so hey, there's good news, right? How do we do better? How do we help? What are the resources? So the first resource is you, right? So negative relationships, poor expectations because of our predicting brain, poor interactions with previous professors or previous folks on campus. You can be a new experience for them to show them that, oh, not everyone is a threat to me. This person is actually a safe person for me. If we could all just be one safe person for one kid, just imagine how many of us are there in here? Like 60, I was told, something like that. That's 60 kids that could have a positive interaction and someone that they feel safe with. And honestly, that's the beginning of rewiring their brain for safety instead of threat. because that's what their brains are a lot of times wired for, is everything's a threat, everyone's a threat. I don't see a lot of safety. So I think one of the first questions you can ask yourself is, are you seen as a safe person? Do you go out of your way to let students know, if you need something, please come to me. That's why I'm here. Like, don't just put it on your syllabus, your office hours. Like that's the first step, right? That's communicating that. But saying it, they need to hear someone say, hey, I'm a safe person. And this might seem silly, but like, I have these two bracelets that I've worn for years. One says Black Lives Matter, and the other one says Pride. Because some folks, they're gonna see this and they're gonna be like, oh, I could probably talk to that dude. Because he might, I don't know if he's gay or not, but he's wearing the Pride thing, right? So he's an ally. And same thing with Black Lives Matter. Like, I'm half Black, but most people think I'm Mexican, right? Because I'm brown, so no one ever knows. But this is a sign for people that I'm safe, right? And it's such a small thing to be able to do. And maybe some people are gonna be like, that's stupid, but honestly, I don't care. Because if one kid is like, you know what, I'm gonna ask him for help because he has the Pride bracelet. Like that might be the one moment when they're like, they were walking to the street to just walk into the street, right? And they see one person, and that's that one flash of, oh, maybe it's not all bad. So the other thing is compassion. Compassion is huge. Their brain is usually not wired for compassion and empathy and success. But we can help them rewire it. Again, that's the whole idea around trauma-informed care, is we gotta help rewire folks' brains. A lot of their brains are wired for survival and immediacy. How can I stay alive right now? Because that's all that I need to worry about. And that's all I've ever known to worry about, is this moment right now. So we need to help them feel safe so they can think ahead. Because I think that's the frustration with adults and kids is, man, you don't think about the future. You're just making bad decisions. You're not thinking about what that's gonna mean in your future. They literally don't have the ability a lot of times to think that far ahead, because that's their prefrontal cortex that is probably underdeveloped and isn't fully developed until they've had enough experiences around future thinking. And so the last thing is connection. Are you a connection? Can you be a connection? Can you be that person where, man, if all hell is breaking loose and you got 3 classes and I'm one of your professors and your other 2 professors like aren't being supportive, just come to me and I'll give you 15 minutes to kind of talk it out. And maybe we can come up with some solutions. That could be a lifesaver. And it teaches them different, because what they've experienced in the past might not be great. So there's the other ways to increase things. Skills mastery. If you see a kid that's really good at something in your class, tell them, man, you're good at this. It made my day when I was at state and I took like a random economics class, and I always like aced the test. And the professor took me, he took me aside and he's like, hey man, you're really good at this economics. Have you ever thought about like majoring in economics? And I was like, no, I have no, what are you talking about? But that made me feel so good about, hey, I'm good at something. So if you can find something that they're good at, build on that. And so here's some really simple resources that you can plug kids into. 211 is a phone number. All they have to do is dial 211 and say, I live in Fresno, I am homeless, I was in foster care, please help me. And 211's whole job is to connect them to a resource. So that's brilliant, super easy. We can all remember that, 211 for anything. They also have a website and you can look at resources on there if you're super curious. CYC is California Youth Connection. This is a foster youth led and organized organization. And the Fresno chapter meets on campus sometimes. So that's another resource. If you know a foster youth and you could mention CYC, have y'all ever heard of CYC? You should go check them out. That could be a great group for them to see, oh, there's other kids like me. It's not just me. Another thing is Next Up, EOPS. Those are programs here at City College. Like Veronica's on. She is part of the Next Up program. It's a great program. They have such good resources for our kids to help them be successful. And then the last thing is the Fresno County Independent Living Program. So again, when I was a social worker for 2 years, that's a program, again, designed to help kids get ready for the real world. Super, super important. And it's other kids that they can see that have experienced the same kinds of things. They can, again, build connections to people and other youth that can be something to rely on as they start to struggle, because they will. Thank you so much, Veronica. There's the phone number and Veronica's email if you want to reach out to her for next up. It's such a good program. They can really, really help with a lot of that stuff. Almost done. John Burton Advocates for Youth. So again, I talk about resources. This is an amazing organization. And literally, if you just Google John Burton Advocates, they have just a ton of resources right now related just to COVID around housing, education, employment, and health. So again, same kind of thing. Tell a kid, man, check out John Burton. They got a lot of stuff that can help you with. Or pull it up on your computer and show them, hey, look, this is John Burton. You should check this out. So last thing I want to talk about, and then open it up for questions, that sort of thing. Can we volunteer with these organizations? That's a good question. I'm not sure. I would guess yes, Melody, that you can volunteer. Real quick plug too, is I used to work at CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates. That is an organization that advocates for foster youth. Brilliant organization. You can get involved with them. I would encourage you to do that if you have time. It's called CASA, Fresno Madera Counties. You can volunteer. Great, great way to help out some kids. So this is what I do. This is Brainwise. I am, again, co-founder of Brainwise. I teach an 8-hour certification, 6 to 8 hours, on all of the things that I've been talking about. It's trauma, and it's called resilience-focused trauma-informed care and education. So right now I'm training educators and I'm training social workers around shifting the way they think about things. Because again, it's all about understanding how our brains are developed and how to retrain our brains and regrow that neuroplasticity so that we see things as safe instead of threatening, because that's how we react to those sorts of things. I talk about neuroscience and brain development, cultural responsivity and anti-racism, and again, trauma-informed practices. And so please reach out to me if you'd like to talk more about this, or if you're interested, you can Google Brainwise Solutions. I am in conversations with City College to maybe develop a training program or a certification program through the college, which would be great. Or if you just as a person want to get this knowledge and more information, I would love to be able to do that for you. I always joke that this training is good for anyone that has a brain because that's what we're talking about, right? And that's all of us. This is learning about trauma and this kind of thing has changed every relationship I have. The relationship with my daughter, with my kids is different, with my wife, everything is different. And the last thing to think about is intergenerational trauma. This is the biggest impact. I can tell you a number of kids where I would start to interact with them and I could tell that their parents were also in foster care. And then I would talk to their parents or look at their file and their parents were in foster care. This is an intergenerational problem, and intergenerational trauma is a real thing. There's studies called epigenetics where we're seriously learning that things like fear and trauma are passed down in our genes. And that's huge. So the more we can do in this generation right now with our kids, with our adults, I love this thought of 7 generations. The indigenous folks always thought about I need to plan for 7 generations. The things I do today will affect 7 generations to come. And the things that have affected and impacted me have been through the last 7 generations up till now. So I strongly encourage you to be different or be more of what you already are, being a safe person and a connection, so that these kids can end this intergenerational trauma as much as possible, not abuse their own kids so that they don't abuse their own kids. And so now I'm just gonna open it up for questions because I think that's my last slide. Yeah, there's my information. My email is super easy. So no excuse if you have something you want to talk about, jwfresno, supereasy@gmail.com or Google Brainwise. I'm gonna look at these questions. Let's see. Do you have any concerns for the adversarial language of allies and foes? Much of the current cultural language is very polarizing, maximizing differences. Yeah, I do have concerns about that. But at the same time, we gotta build safety. And so, I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to think more about that. Let's see, do you know how many students at Fresno City have been or currently are in foster care system? That's a tough one because they have to self-identify. So if they're over 18, even if they're in one of our programs or if they're in Next Up, we can't just blast it out there and say, oh yeah, all these kids are in care, because that's their story to tell. So it's really hard to put a number on that. Veronica might know. I don't know, Veronica, if you know how many kids are in care or were in care. I know y'all have like 27,000 kids, so I would guess at least 200, at least 200. And then, yeah, Natalie Chavez is also a worker. Okay, so there you go. Veronica currently has 76 in the Next Up program. So there's probably those 76, and there's probably at least 100, because there's probably at least 25 more who are like, I ain't telling no one I was in foster care. Like, I don't want no one to know, which is totally understandable. Because some folks want to keep it on the down low. They don't want to put their business out there that they've experienced. Again, shame and fear are huge, huge things for us as humans that weighs on us. Because some folks haven't gotten over the fact that I was in foster care for 5 years. My parents weren't able to get me back. I don't know if it was because they didn't care or they couldn't do it, but that hurt. And I have shame around that. So that's the other thing. We got to come at them with safety and understanding and support and those sorts of things. Any other questions? It'd be great if someone took themselves off mute and maybe, could someone reflect on something, maybe something that stuck out to you if we have a minute? Because I'm tired of hearing my own voice and I'd love to hear someone else's.
I just want to take a second to tell you, thank you. It's been very valuable information. I teach a child development class at Fresno State. I'm full-time at City, but I teach one class at Fresno State. And so we talk about these ACEs and the impact of foster youth, but it's really great to hear just locally what's happening in services and resources, rather than just get information from a book and say, here's what a textbook states. So I really appreciate you putting humanity to the concept of foster youth, and being able to carry that then into the classroom and to our students who both are foster youth and those who want to work with foster youth and those in this as part of our population. So I appreciate that. And so thank you for your presentation. It's been great.
Great, thank you.
I appreciate you speaking about this. I am a current, obviously I'm a successful person. I have my master's, but trauma shows up currently in my relationships. So I appreciate that nod to speaking about how you can see success, but you don't see all of it.
Yeah. And trauma doesn't go away. There's a great other book called Our Bodies Keep the Score. And that's just brilliant because we've experienced things in our body. It will never leave us. And yeah, sometimes it comes out later and we think we're good. And then something just whoosh brings it back up and we never know. And so that's the other thing. Maybe just real quickly, if you have a kid that blows up in your classroom because maybe you're getting on them or something and they literally just lose it and run out, we don't know what they've experienced. So if you could not do that, I don't know. Of course, we want to hold people accountable, but we have to be really careful that we don't shame on top of shame on top of shame. Yeah.
Hi, Jason. This is Angie Keys. Thank you for providing this training. I think not necessarily a question, but more, I guess, reflection, especially working not only at City College, but also working within a group home setting and seeing how our kiddos already had a lot of obstacles and hurdles, and then seeing, especially when they're getting ready to essentially, when they legally become adults, but are still cognitively functioning, you know, as maybe an adolescent, 10 to 12 years old. And so I think just highlighting that this is something that is an issue, a problem, but also that there are resources and how we can not only be there to support our students, but also continue like educating ourselves on some of their needs and what we can do, not only as, staff working either within the community college system or at the group homes, but, just making sure that the students know that they do have resources available for them.
Yeah, and you bring up another beautiful point. You're going to see a student that looks like an adult standing in front of you, but their developmental brain might not be that of what you see, and you have to be so careful with that. I teach foster parent classes, and I say, okay, you have to give me your they should know betters, because you don't get to keep those anymore. You can't put that on anyone. You can't say, oh, they should know better because they're 18, or they should know better because they're here. You gotta be real careful with that, because they might not know. Their experience might not be the same as yours or mine. They might have not had any good educational experiences, and they're walking into your classroom with